When you check into a hotel and you present your ID, do you ever think that you're giving away far more personal information than necessary? The hotel only wants to prove your identity, but now they also know your age, weight, home address, driver's license number, and more. As soon as you hand it over, you lose control. We're often asked to give away too much of our private data. Once it's out of your hands, that information can become susceptible to hacking, the sale of your personal data, or a barrage of unwanted ads. But what if there was an option to verify your personal information without giving away unnecessary, critical, private details? Verifiable credentials, a pillar of Web 5, solves this. There are digital certificates of claims that are easily shared in a private and secure way. They can prove your legal name, age, ownership of an asset, or anything really. Verifiable credentials limit the amount of data you share to only what's required, and they can't be tampered with or faked. Let's reimagine how identification could work. With Web 5, the government issues a verifiable credential that proves your identity and lives in what we call an identity wallet. So now when you check into the hotel, you present the front desk with a verifiable credential and share only what the hotel needs. This establishes that you are who you say you are, without giving away more personal information than you'd like. Verifiable credentials make proving claims easier, more private, and more secure.
All right. Happy Friday, everyone. If it's your first time tuning into this stream, this is a stream where we talk to different projects and companies who are doing amazing things in the SSI or digital identity industry. This is a great opportunity for me and others to also learn about like how the whole ecosystem is working. So today we have Vitos with us, or actually, I didn't ask backstage, how do you pronounce it? Is it Vitos? There is a Vitos. That's wrong.
Vitos.
It doesn't matter. Okay. Yeah, I just assumed. I'm like, dang, I should ask backstage. But yeah, we do have that. But before we jump into everything, I do have an icebreaker question for the audience and for YouTube, Misha and Tom. First question is, what is your earliest memory of the internet? Or like of using the internet?
I'll let you go first, Misha. Go on.
I'm going to jump in. I'm going to be completely honest. I think mine was either MSN or Miniclip. And it was the sort of running home from school and speaking to exactly the same people you had just spoken to for the entire day and just speaking to them for longer. I think that was probably mine.
I mean,
what about you, Tom?
Mine isn't that far away. It's basically doing the exact same thing, but running around RuneScape with the people I've been spending all day with. So collecting silly hats and things like that. Yeah.
I can definitely relate, y'all. I mean, I wasn't using MSN. I was using like AIM. And like I don't know why I was like so excited. I'm like, I have to go on AIM. Like I wasn't just hanging out with those people. And then RuneScape, yeah, that too. All right. Second question for icebreaker. Not like a phishing attempt or anything, but what's like your first username? I always think it's funny because it could be a little bit embarrassing. I'll embarrass myself first. Mine was like Antigua Baby 200. I was born in Antigua, and I thought that was true.
That's a great name.
Yeah, mine not good. Mine was like, I was like Monkey Trouble 66, I think, because my parents, I think, called me Monkey. My birthday was like 6th of June, and I think I played a lot of Bubble Trouble, that game with the guy with the big red head. And so, yeah, that was, I think that was my first one.
That's cute. I love that.
I honestly can't remember what my first one was. It was probably something. Well, it was definitely something forgettable. But the one that I remember being like, oh yeah, that's my online identity, was like my Xbox gamer tag, which was in the skies. Don't know why. Don't know where that came from. Still use that email address to this day.
I love that. I love that. All right. So gonna say hi to people in the chat. Angie saying hi. Tanya said that her username was wisecracks because she likes jokes. Love that.
That's a good one. That's a good
Yeah,
one.
that is really great. And then Ace said hello. I wish I was that witty as like a
Yeah.
8-year-old on the internet. All right. So really quickly, before just so everyone knows what we're going to get into, we're kind of going to just talk like intros, what the company is doing, what you all are doing. We'll talk a little bit about how you all fit into the education industry or what you're doing with that. We'll look at a demo that you all have, and also we'll talk a little bit about the finance industry. And then also, since I'm not in Europe, like, excuse me for this saying this, it's like EIDAS or EDAS. I don't know how you pronounce it, but we're going to learn a little bit more about that as well.
Nice, very cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, happy to kind of just introduce myself quickly. So I'm one of the co-founders of Vidos, and I look after everything from kind of our partnership side to all of our kind of product research, speaking with a lot of folks in the financial institutions, education, as you mentioned, travel, and a lot of the standards bodies and consortiums that are kind of working in this space at the moment.
Cool. What about you, Tom?
So hi, I'm Tom. I focus primarily on the sort of marketing side of Vidos. I touch a little bit on the community aspects and events and things like that. But yeah, primarily supporting from my marketing background. Yeah.
Awesome. Tell us a little bit more, y'all, about what Vidos is. Now that I know how to pronounce it, what does it do?
Yeah, so kind of, I guess just from the top, Vidos really at the core of it is just a set of reliable managed services that make it really easy for companies to take advantage of the different types of digital identifiers and verifiable credentials that we're seeing in the ecosystem. And kind of specifically what we mean by that is helping companies, what we call relying parties, to integrate the acceptance and verification of these identities and credentials into their existing applications and their business processes. Because I think we, from our side, sort of saw the best way that we could contribute to accelerating the adoption of self-sovereign identity systems was by trying to take the guesswork out of the equation for the relying party side and make the technologies that this incredible ecosystem has built around kind of issuing credentials and identity providers, and just make them as easy to use and as valuable as possible.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense. Like, there are some technologies in this space that can be a little bit hard to grasp at first if you're not new to it. So I like that you all are like, hey, let's figure out how we can make it more simple. Anything else you wanted to add, Tom? Or
I think Misha pretty much covered everything, but yeah, at the core of what Vidos is trying to do is alleviate some of the pains of adopting these technologies, because depending on the situation that a company is in, it can be a massive upheaval and a massive shift to start dealing with new identities, new technologies, etc. So Vidos is there to take that burden on and provide something that they understand and that they can work with from the get-go, basically. Yeah.
awesome. Let's talk about like an example. So you all have like a couple of like resources and content that you all do, kind of educating people about how a digital identity works. And I really like the one you all have on like digital identity in education. So particularly, I'm curious about like how do you see like SSI or digital identity impacting or benefiting education?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think as the author of a lot of that content, I'm going to pass to Tom on sort of the specifics of SSI in the education space. But I think it's always kind of helpful, especially in this industry, to kind of set some of that context. And I don't see it so much as the technology changing the landscape of education itself, but I think what's so important to see is the landscape of education has shifted, and our technologies are kind of having to evolve to meet these shifts. So what we see today is actually this concept kind of thought of as like lifelong learning, and it's a much more transitory global economy. So there's lots of different types of routes through the education system now. A lot of people no longer just like go to school for a set amount of consecutive years, then go on to have 1 or 2 jobs in that same country. Instead, we're seeing people sort of go to school, get a job, go back to school, get a new job in a totally different country, learn specific skills and get qualifications in that job that then they can use in another job. And it kind of just keeps going. And it's a much more interwoven system between kind of education and employment, and the number of credentials, so to speak, that are related to our learning and our development that we're picking up on this journey has just like significantly increased. So everyone that's in this system now needs kind of better connective tools to handle these changes. And we're seeing that students and employees need a way to port their achievements from one place to another, and employers also need a way to easily verify what could be a number of different transcripts and claims from different schools and workplaces across like different countries and continents. So I think the benefit I see as kind of like a whole in SSI is in education is kind of that it makes this data portability and the ease of the trusted global verification possible. And I think that is just like one of the kind of critical benefits to understand about SSI as a whole is just this ability to kind of connect and unsilo our real world systems, which are just now predominantly digitized, but remembering that we need to do this in a secure and user-centric way. Our teachers have important jobs in the world. Like, the point isn't to give teachers another technology, but to try and sort of reduce the time that they spend in convoluted IT systems so that they can actually spend more time face-to-face with students. But yeah, I mean, I'll pass it on sort of the specifics of it, but I would say for anyone who's interested in kind of the sort of learning employment system as a whole, I would definitely check out the Digital Credential Consortium, the DDC. They have a like LER ecosystem map, which is super helpful to understand all those moving pieces.
Okay, I've never heard of the DCC before, but I do like what you said about like verifying like the different educational requirements you had. Like, I talked to Angie, my boss, before, and she talked about like how she's from Louisiana, and there's hurricanes and stuff like that happen there. Sometimes your school doesn't exist anymore, or I mean, my high school doesn't exist anymore, and nothing happened to it; it just shut down. So it could be hard to prove that you actually attended. Tom, let us know, since you're the creator of the content.
I think you touched really on the core of the problem, is that when the internet was born, of all of the things that could be digitized and spread out across the world, I think education, and I mean it in the sense of learning, not even necessarily the formal sense of education, is probably what the internet was built for: sharing information, sharing knowledge. And it's done a really good job of that. Platforms like YouTube, Twitch, etc., have done a fantastic job of connecting people who know a lot of information to the people who want to learn about it. And it's easier than ever to go on YouTube and search whatever it is that you want to learn about. However, the transfer of knowledge has not been followed up with the transfer of the credentials and the validity of that knowledge. So it's very hard for someone to go onto YouTube or Twitch or Udemy or whatever platform it is digitally and understand that the person that they're learning from is verified, a good educator, knows what they're talking about, 20 years in the business, or whatever it is. So one of the things that digital identities and decentralized identities has brought to the table is that legitimacy to the standard that you get from like a professor or from a university or another institute. You can categorically say that this person, has the credentials to talk about whatever it is that they're teaching about. That's a fantastic opportunity. I think that's really interesting. And then on the other side of the same coin, you have students who maybe they went to Oxford or Harvard or wherever, and they've got a degree in whatever field they've got it in, computer science, engineering, English, whatever, they get a nice big shiny piece of paper that says that they followed the curriculum and they know, enough about that experience. You can learn just as much online these days, or from smaller institutes, or from smaller educators, but you don't necessarily get the big shiny piece of paper, which isn't a problem. That's fine. I'm not saying that there isn't any validity in that, in those institutions, but what the problem arises is in the exchange and communication between those things. So as an example, me and Misha are based in the UK. If I went to get a degree in Oxford and I walked away with it, and then I went to, apply for either a further education or another job in another country, let's say India, how do they weigh up how much I learned from Oxford and the courses I've done and the modules I've done and the knowledge I have from the year that it was relevant against their curriculum, to say that these sort of two educational units are equivalent or whatever, because currently the knowledge doesn't get wrapped digitally. The institution does. Like, you can go, oh, Oxford, yeah, I've heard of Oxford, or yeah, I've heard of Harvard. But if it's a little school that you haven't heard of, how can you still say that this bit of knowledge is equivalent or transferable? So that's one of the things that digital identities will bring to the education world, which I think is really cool. And another thing is the expiry of knowledge. A lot of industries, particularly computer science, moves at such a pace. Someone with a computer science degree from the 70s is not the same as a computer science degree from 2010 or whatever. Not to say that they aren't both valuable, but we need to know if someone has topped up their stuff. If someone got computer science degrees in the 70s and then they've been learning every day and working every year to achieve more and keep up to date, that should be reflected in their digital identity. Like, okay, yeah, you did get a degree in the 70s, but you've been working hard and you've kept up to date every year since. That should be reflected in your application to whatever it is you're trying to do with that knowledge. And these are the sort of problems that digital identity solutions aim to tackle in the education realm. I mean,
Yeah.
it's such a big thing. It works in every industry, but I think those are the most exciting things in education. Yeah.
Yeah, you came up with so many examples that I've never thought of. Go ahead, Misha, before I have my comment.
No, I'm all good. You go for it.
Oh, okay. No, I was just gonna say, let me see if I can organize my thoughts, because you brought up so many good examples. One of having the certified person, right? Because I've had many moments where I've bought a Udemy course when I was younger, or like just starting to learn to code, and then I'm like, oh, this is crap. Like they showed me in the preview, they made it seem like it was gonna be good.
And you got like, oh, it's 5 stars with 49 reviews. You're like, yeah, cool, but then you don't know the legitimacy of that. And also, it might be a really good course and a really good educator, but they're teaching you stuff that's 5 years out of date.
Yes,
You're like,
so
I didn't know that. But maybe that's a good thing if you're starting out or whatever. But
still,
it's hard to know. Yeah,
it's
no
hard
equivalency to learn these things.
Yeah, I love that example. And then the other example I loved was like the credentials in different countries, because I have, like, I'm from a different country and I have many friends who, like, they went from a different country to America, and then they're like, oh, they have to get kept back because they can't prove of what they've learned. And I'm like, some of those countries, they're learning a little bit more than the US. So
Well, absolutely. It's so hard to do. And I'm not saying that digital identities are going to solve all of these problems, but they will be a stepping stone to opening the conversations about how we elaborate on those things. Because it gives a sort of level playing field to everything. You carry all of your credentials with you, and as you were talking about, like some schools don't exist anymore, so you can't even email the dean and be like, you know, were they a good student? That this person doesn't exist anymore. So does that credential just disappear? No, of course not. It needs to be kept somewhere. And I think the great thing about the idea of self-sovereign identities matched with verified credentials is that it's on the individual to manage that and to keep that alive, but backed by the authority of a verified system. Yeah.
Love that. And y'all can't see the comments in our Discord. We also stream this here, but we have a lot of people saying like, this makes so much sense. This happens to so many of my family members. Like, this would help with gatekeeping and all that. Before we get into the demo, I want to like give Misha a chance to say her thoughts, and then we'll jump into the demo.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Tom covered a huge amount of that. I think the education system is going to be one of the most exciting places for SSI, because I think it's more so one of those places where the actual individuals in the system have really felt the effects of not having these kind of technologies in place and the ability to kind of take achievements with them where they go. So yeah, I think I would also say if folks are kind of interested in the education space, definitely kind of look at One EdTech, who manage kind of all those sort of badging standards and things like that, but they do a lot of the work there. And then other ones I'd also definitely recommend looking at are like the Learning Economy, who do some amazing things around education credentials, and Velocity Network as well also do. So there are some fantastic people in this space.
The open badges system by One EdTech is eye-opening. It's fantastic. Definitely check that out if you're interested.
Yeah, things for me to know, and I'll try to add those in the show notes as well. All right, let's jump into the demo, y'all. Let's see what's there.
I'll hand back over to you, Misha. Take it away.
Amazing. So yeah, I guess just kind of gonna start from the top. I mean, we publicly released Vidos Universal Resolver as our first product. And this is used for DID resolution. And sort of when explaining DID resolution, I always find it kind of helpful to start at some of the foundations to actually set the context. I know we've got kind of people from different backgrounds in the audience. So I think just kind of starting with what might kind of feel like the basics, but really helps just set those foundations, is kind of understanding a DID being just a globally unique identifier, kind of string of characters that can represent anything from you, a person, to an organization or a thing or entity across the web. And the power of DIDs is that they enable these verifiable, decentralized digital identities to exist. And I think that word verifiable is critical. The second important thing to know about DIDs is that they have an associated DID document. So Tom, if you just go on to the next one, I think this probably helps really understand that. These DID documents contain the cryptographic material, amongst other things, that are needed for the verification processes. So that's where the DID resolver actually comes in. The DID resolver is used by the verifier or the client to get the DID document and any associated metadata, so that the client can then carry out any actions related to that DID. Actions would kind of be using the cryptographic material to basically go and get the keys that you need to run the checks against the verifiable credentials that have been presented with the DID, or things like getting the service endpoints to interact with secure protocols. At a very simple level, I think the main thing to understand is just you can't verifiably do anything with the DID without first getting the DID document. I sometimes find that quite hard to visualize. We see a lot of these types of diagrams, and they're kind of fine if you're in the space, but they can be a little bit sort of abstract. So I actually tend to liken it to a sort of analogy of a library catalog, where you can imagine kind of a vast library with millions of books, and like all libraries, each book has a unique book code so that you can go and find the book in that library. And in this analogy, the unique book code represents a DID, and the associated book and its contents is the DID document. So when you go into this gigantic library to find a specific book, you search the book's unique code in the designated library catalog system. And it's the catalog system that tells you where to go and find that book so that you can go and retrieve it and access the contents. The catalog system is the resolver. You give it the DID, it lets you retrieve the associated DID document. It's kind of as simple as that one. The problem, and where kind of this like nice day out at the library situation gets a little bit more complicated, is there are in fact hundreds of libraries. And so if we kind of recall from the original DID structure slide, all DIDs have a DID method. And what the DID method does is it tells the resolver which verifiable data registry to go and get the DID document from. That registry can be a local host blockchain web server, or obviously in TBD's case, the BitTorrent protocol. And there's hundreds of DID methods. So I guess like TBD's, DHT, and in the real world, that means individually setting up and managing infrastructure for the ability to support all of these different DID methods so that you can just retrieve that DID document for any DID. And that's why we essentially built as our first thing this managed universal resolver, because it being universal is so important. The aim is just, as we kind of said from the beginning, like to take out the guesswork and take away the maintenance, and being able to just give the relying party the ability to carry out verification processes against any DID, like now and in the future, and not have to kind of, I think where we're still early in this ecosystem, not have to predict what they need or kind of worry about not setting up infrastructure that may be redundant if sort of an issuer starts switching to a different DID method. So I think reiterating on the why and why we decided to build a fully managed resolver, it's kind of because it's critical to the success of the verification process, and therefore it needs to be reliable and scalable and universally interoperable. But it's not an exciting piece of technology by the generic sense. And it's just not a good use of time for the relying parties engineers to spend building and managing and maintaining Docker containers for all of these different resolvers as new DID methods appear and standards evolve. So the resolver sits at the bottom of the infrastructure stack to enable the client verification layer to just be interoperable with the rest of the ecosystem. And I think as a sort of example of the simplicity that we're sort of aiming for here, we recently did some work on the Onyx by JP Morgan SDK, which can be used for issuing and verifying credentials. And previously, the SDK only supported DID Ether and DID Key, but with just a one-line code change that provides the endpoint and API key for the universal resolver, the SDK can now be extended to be used with all other supported DID methods. And so that's kind of why that's our foundational piece. But as Tom has shown here on this slide, as you can see, kind of what's next for us is currently in beta testing, but it's the surrounding modules that a relying party needs to carry out the verification processes. That's what we call the verifier and validator, which you can see there. And these we've kind of, again, we've broken everything out just to provide maximum flexibility and composability. But in simple terms, the verifier kind of lets you answer, is this credential legitimate? Does the issuer of this credential consider it valid? And then the validator is like the business logic of the relying party. It asks, is this credential okay to be used in this given situation or for the purpose it's going to serve? So kind of final example on this of what that validator verifier sort of looks like is if you think about kind of going to rent a car while you're on holiday and you're all excited because you're 18 and you can finally legally drive, and that's great. So you present your driving license credential to the car rental service, and the car rental service verifies it using the verifier that, yep, this is a legitimate credential issued by the British Driving License Agency, the DVLA, and it's still valid for 50 more years. That's great. But then the validator has rules that are specific to the rental company, and that says, in this country, you actually can't rent a car until you have a minimum of 1 year holding the license. And so, yes, the credential is a verified driving license, but the validator is what tells you that this credential actually isn't valid to carry out the intended action. And so that's where we kind of see all these building blocks start to come together. And there's also cases where you don't need the full verification flow. Like you already trust the credential, you just need to know, is it still valid at a specific point in time? Something like a hotel room key would be an example of that. But yeah, I think that's sort of FIDOS and the services that we're building right now, you can test out the resolver and kind of everything there. But we're continuously building, and like one of the big things for us is, as I say, doing all the supporting technologies. So as Tom's kind of pulled up here, you can see like the usage logs and service APIs and everything that kind of on the enterprise relying party side, you need to meet all the compliance and regulations and basically all the boring stuff. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy to pass to kind of Tom any industry use cases, or if you have any questions kind of on that as a stack as well.
First off, I love the presentation. I thought it was a really great like explanation of how everything works, and I liked like the animation as well, because it's like, oh cool, like look at all the libraries and stuff. Question: will we be able to like? Is it off track, or you all are like, oh wait, we're not prepared if we actually like try out the did resolver? Or I don't want to like throw you guys into something you're not prepared.
I mean, I'll let you load that up, Misha. We can load up the did resolver.
Okay.
It's not the sexiest of demos, you know, setting up an API call, but it is, you know, it's very straightforward.
That's okay. They're developers. They want to see that's okay if it's the tech. I think while you set that up, I can play I have a little quiz, audience. Don't be afraid. I have a little quiz, but I think it falls really well into what Misha was talking about. And if the quiz is over and we're still not ready, we can just answer a few questions that we see in the audience, and let me know, because maybe I like threw you all off. So
no, I'm happy to. The other point I was going to point out is that so the VIDOS resolver is part of an ecosystem of tools that are sort of enterprise enabled, and basically what we're trying to do is take the burden off of you having to manage all the coming and changing chains, different did protocols, different did documents, etc., so that as a developer you can just say, here's the did URL, you know, did : Polygon or Ether or Bitcoin or whatever for this particular person that they've inputted. Maybe that's through their wallet, maybe that's through a different system. Go and fetch the details and bring me their credentials, bring me their did document, etc. And you don't have to worry about that. So it's not the best analogy, but it's kind of like doing a Google search. You haven't got to do a Google search and say these sites and these sites and these sites and these sites. You just do it, and it aggregates across all of its known nodes and brings you back the correct information, and in a presentable way that you're like, that's the most likely information they were looking for. And once you pair the resolver with the validator, the business logic like Misha talked about, and the verification, orchestration, authentication, etc., you almost have a all-in-one identity solution. And it can be complex if your building's up, you know, something that's very highly secure and operates around very highly secure data. You can make it very complex, very strong. Or if it's just a simple you know, we're jumping in to see what POAPs this person has, it can be very quick. Just pull up the wallet address, pull up the POAPs, and, you know, stuff like that. But it very much comes down to the developers. We're really building sort of microservices here for you to pick and choose.
I love it. I love the Google search analogy as well. All right, I'm gonna play the quiz, and then we'll jump into Misha's demo. And then also, y'all, I do see your comments your questions in the comments. Keep adding more, so that once the demo is over, we'll be able to immediately answer your questions. But this quiz is like, it's just a little fun quiz. Try answering it in the comments. And yeah, let's just jump into it. Okay, cool. Hope that was fun. And I guess it went a little fast, or the comments are coming in a little later. But loved all y'all answers. Y'all was everyone saying that was the answer. All right, cool. We will jump into Misha's demo, and then we're going to go ahead and answer your questions. This should also give my teammates time to help me bring the questions from Discord into StreamYard. All right, I will share your screen. Go right ahead. Oh,
yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is what the dashboard looks like. This is just a small test account. But as you can see, we have a number of resolver instances here. And as we say, kind of things around policies, API keys, configurations down the left-hand side. But there's also a great question from Aaron on the Discord in terms of like, how do you know which did methods, or like, how do you set which did methods to allow or deny? And so if we just kind of go through the process of creating a resolver ID, is there. This is just a new resolver instance. So TBD testing. When you see now the configurations, and again, where we're setting this up for ease, you can basically take like template configuration and apply that to multiple resolvers, etc., as needed. But just in today's, we can kind of say enable all of the different methods, or alternatively, to Aaron's question, if, for example, in the EU or certain financial institutions, etc., they only accept credentials that, or DIDs that are related from like EBSI or DID Web or kind of Polygon, you can start putting some of those rules in the verification place. As I say, this is kind of that very, very bottom layer. It's basically just what is the resolver going to go and resolve from the analogy, like which libraries will it acceptably look in. So if I just say enable all for now anyway, we can just do that and then save that. And so this is the resolver instance. If we come down, you can see all the different methods here, but here, basically you can sort of test a DID. Here we have the example, which is an ether address. And then that there, what we're looking at here is the DID document. So you can see the DID and then everything related to the DID document, as I say, kind of everything you need around the authentication, the controller, and kind of then you also have the different schemas in the context that's associated there. So that is like as simple as it is, and kind of why we always say the great thing and like the worst thing about what we're building is it's kind of the critical infrastructure that just isn't that exciting, but it needs to be so reliable and so scalable, because this is like that first piece in being able to verify or run any verification processes. And so that is
I'll add one like note quickly, which might answer Aaron's question as well. You can, as Misha just showed, you can set the DID policies and the accepted methods at a resolver instance level. Or if you're a company and you know you exclusively work like in the EU, you can set a configuration policy for at that level so that all of your resolvers are subjected to that configuration. So if you were to come along and make another instance, it would automatically only pull through EU policies, or US or whatever it is that you've got configured. So you can set policies at like a global level, I guess.
Actually, yeah, that's
don't accidentally make different instances. Yeah.
No, it's a really, really good point. It's like, again, and I keep saying it, but in essence of us trying to make things easier, it's being able to provide kind of the template rules as well around different compliance requirements. So being able to kind of say, okay, when it comes to setting up a resolver and you need to meet the compliance for the EU, or you specifically need to meet the compliance requirements for Italy financial services, like here are configurations and templates and policies that you can use and set at this level. And just try and make that, again, so much easier for people.
Yeah. So you can essentially, you can import policies that fit the guidelines that you're working under. And you don't have to do that like every time you make a new instance. You can just set it as like a global standard. You know, we just work in the EU. These are our standard policies, or Italy, or whatever it is. But if you need to configure individual instances, you can, as Misha showed.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I think that was a good demo to still see, even though y'all said it's simple, you know, maybe people haven't seen like what a did document would look like or anything, like how it's resolved. Aaron has a follow-up question and said, HTTP host, I see host as the same namespace level as the method in did method, whatever, specifically BitTorrent implementation. I don't know if I have context of what.
Yeah,
but
I'm not entirely sure what the question is, Aaron,
Yeah,
but
me
I
neither.
think you're trying to ask if we differentiate on different namespace levels.
Oh, he said not really a question, more of a comment. Okay. Sorry about that. I should have like read it ahead of time. Like when I started reading, I was like, wait, what? Sorry, keep going though. I think you were gonna say something, Tom.
I was just gonna say that we support a range of different did methods, and you can check out the docs for the up-to-date list on which specifications we support. And also in that docs, you'll be able to find example did. I don't know what I guess did URLs is probably the best example to use and to get started with. But I think in this question, you're asking if the BitTorrent.
He expanded more in Discord. I think the questions are coming in late, but he was just saying that he was just commenting that there's a lot of did methods that you don't want to trust all of them. So
for sure, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was like, wait, what?
It's a really good point. And it's absolutely true. I think this is sort of where we come from, the position of saying we want to be as kind of agnostic as possible. And I think it's more the fact that we've seen kind of one of the sort of blockers on the relying party side to adopting some of these technologies, even though there are fantastic kind of issuers and credentials in the space, is sort of not knowing what to build or like what did methods to support in case of changes, etc. And so it's more about kind of future proofing and then letting the relying party decide who they trust. Like the technology itself is pretty agnostic. It's just then the relying party can make it completely tailored to their needs. And exactly as you say, if the relying party is in a highly regulated industry, very likely they are going to reduce the number of did methods that they accept, even at the resolver level. But I think that's when it becomes super interesting to have the verifier and the validator as well, because the validator then lets you set kind of additional business logic on top of that. So it's a really good call out. And yeah,
we're not advocating for allow all did methods, but you know,
you're saying you can do it, but it's up to them. Yeah. Okay, so I don't see too many more questions. There might be when I've seen one person typing for a while, but I have one question, and it's not necessarily regarding your demo, but just your thoughts on like digital identity in general. So a lot of times when we talk about like bringing digital identity, it's gonna like make things more accessible for folks. One person like had asked me in a Twitter space, they were like, how do we know that this won't widen the digital divide and exclude people that maybe don't necessarily understand how all of this works, or maybe they don't have like phones or I don't know, devices. So I'm curious on y'all's perspective on that.
I'm happy to kind of jump in with my thoughts, and then Tom,
go for it.
You might disagree with my thoughts as well, which is very fair. I think from my perspective, when it comes to this conversation, I think it's a really important one. I think my first point would just be that no technology is going to solve everything for everyone. And I am actually quite personally wary when people sort of kind of have this technology is going to save the world kind of mentality, and it's going to work for everyone. I've been speaking actually with a lot of people about building resilient identity systems. And I think two things have come out from this kind of research is one, that it's critical that you don't separate these systems, these identity systems, when you're building them from their actual social, political, and economic context. Like, you have to start with the holistic system and understand the people that you are building for before deciding the technology that you're actually going to use to solve that problem. And I think the second piece that has come out quite a few times is like, it's also just crucial to build multiple routes to the same goal. So I've been speaking with some folks in government, and when it's such an interesting example, because when you work in identity in government, like, you really don't choose your customer. Like, your customer is everyone in the country, and the identity solutions you build has to work for everyone. And so very often you will see multiple routes to achieving like an identity verification. Then those routes will be both online and offline. So I think that is always important to note in these conversations. I don't think any technology will work for absolutely everyone, but I do think there is, and kind of the second side of this is that I think there is a significant positive impact that SSI technologies can have on sort of existing cases of like excluding marginalized groups, because I think today around, it's like 850 million people globally lack an official ID. And as a result of that, they often can't access essential services like healthcare and education. And so being able to generate specific credentials that can prove an identity and associated attributes in like a given context that are just like fit for purpose for the situation that they're used in is huge in terms of what it can do. And I think a great example of that is actually, there's an initiative called the European Qualification Passport for Refugees. And that enables refugees who may have insufficient or missing documentation around like academic credentials they have from their own country, like undergraduate degrees, stuff like that. And it lets them get a trusted credential issued that can then be used as an identifier and attestation of academic achievement when applying for kind of education in European universities, specifically because of this initiative. And it's not, I think it's important, kind of the important piece of this is like, it's not a full ID that can be used anywhere, but it steps towards opening more and more doors for more people. And I think that's what's so important here, is being able to provide these types of credentials much more efficiently, effectively, and in a trusted way, so that more people can access more public services. Is just like one of the first steps that needs to be taken. So that's kind of where I sit on that. But Tom, feel free to jump in otherwise.
That was really insightful. Go ahead.
I by and large agree with you. Yeah. I think if you put the technology to the side for a minute, and look at the philosophy behind the technology. So when you look at the blockchain, you're really talking about an immutable and transparent record of transactions. And when you look at digital identity, you're talking about attaching that to something potentially on the blockchain, not always, but potentially. And when you look at issuers and verifiers, we're talking about opening and widening our doors to a new range of verifiers. Typically, historically, these have always been government organizations, the driving license people, the education people, the medical people, whatever it is. We're talking about allowing more institutes and more recognition in the people who hand out credentials and identities. We're also talking about an immutable and irreplaceable way of storing them on the blockchain. So your house deed or your medical records aren't going to get burnt in a fire or lost to a country at war or whatever. They're stored in an immutable place. It kind of seems like the perfect marriage of technologies. We're talking about, I can go to a smaller institute because smaller institutes are now recognized, get a credential, whether that's medical, educational, governmental, whatever. I can put it in a place that can't be burnt. It's on the blockchain that everybody can see. And in theory, I should be able to go to any country and show them and they can understand it. So it's kind of like the perfect match of technologies. Can't be destroyed, can come from more places and can be shown to more places. When you look at it on that level, what's not to love about the idea of digital identities? I can't lose my passport in a fire. There's more places I can get a passport, and there's more places that recognize a passport.
I think these were a good example. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. What's not to love? We're not 100% there, of course. It's a developing system, as was the internet when it was first conceived. But we are making steps towards a world where things are more interoperable and more available to wider people. So, to answer your original question, yes, I think these are positive steps to reducing marginalization between access and hopefully widening the access to more people. I can't, say whether that's going to fully be realized. I really hope it does. But I think it's our latest, if not best, step towards that. Yeah.
Awesome. We have a couple of questions. One, people were asking, they love the did resolver, especially my boss Angie, and she said, where do I try it out? So I put it up in a couple of places, but just to say it out loud, dashboard.vitals.id is where you would try out the did resolver. We have a question from, let me take this banner off so that we can show the question from Andre, I think it was. And Andre was saying, it's still not clear to me how we can add a new did method and make it available in the resolver.
So I think in terms of, so I'm wondering in terms of the question, like you can add a new did method and make it available in the resolver by kind of selecting on and off the ones that are there. In terms of actually adding another did method, we are continuously adding did methods into the resolver, and our aim is to basically provide all the ones that really need to be supported in the ecosystem. That's kind of why we're doing so much of this product research right now in a lot of different industries, to really get an idea of like which of the did methods that are being used in different use cases, so that we can continue to introduce support for them. But if there is a did method that you want to use that isn't in there at the moment, then 100% reach out to us and let us know which one that is, and we can start building support for that. As we're kind of just coming out of like publicly launching this service, we started with those just to kind of start really testing, but those will continue to increase.
Perfect. So it's reaching out to you all. All right. Other question or just comment. Someone was just agreeing with you all, saying multiple onboarding paths reduces friction. I think another person had also mentioned this, and I think I want to like address it a little bit and then let y'all address it too. So Aaron was asking, how do we mitigate the use of VCs for those with power who may exclude those without it? For example, only granting mortgage loan to people who can prove that they have their bachelor's. I will say, like, this is my perspective. I want to hear y'all's too. Like, I think similar with AI, people can build stuff for good and evil, and you can't really like control how they're going to do it. There is an organization right now called Form Free who is doing something similar, but in a positive way. So they've used TBD's SDKs. They came on one of our live streams a while ago, and basically what they did is they're enabling people to use verifiable credentials so that people can be able to get loans. So instead of like being judged by like, or being victims of like unconscious bias, like maybe, you live on this particular street or you're Black or something like that, so maybe we don't want to give you a loan. You just basically show like, this is my credit score. You have the power of being able to choose that you want this loan from this particular organization. And once you match with them, then more of your information is shared. Happy to hear what y'all think too.
Yeah.
No, I think you picked such an important point there. And I think that's kind of like two sides to it. And one is obviously there is usually regulation in most industries around like what you can and can't like qualify and disqualify people against. And actually what's kind of almost the blessing of verifiable credentials and kind of SSI technology as a whole is kind of what Rizel, you were explaining there, of like selective disclosure, which essentially says, actually, rather than kind of the systems that we have today, where then you might actually end up coming across unconscious bias or subconscious biases where because you just naturally have to give more than is really necessary, because you're probably giving like a full copy of your passport or something like that. With these technologies instead, there's this kind of idea of selective disclosure, where you can just present the information that is actually needed and is relevant to the loan. So combined with kind of the regulations you have around like what is acceptable to qualify and disqualify someone against a loan, then combined with the fact that actually you don't have to present as much personal information when doing these types of applications, we should actually see it go the other way, in terms of more people getting more access, because there's less room for subconscious bias or like other types of bias. But yeah, sorry, Tom, go for it.
No, you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what I wanted to say. And I think the analogy I always turn to here is, if you go to a bar now, in most parts of the world anyway, if you go to a bar, the bouncer or the man on the door will ask you, can I see your ID? The question they're actually asking is, are you old enough to drink? Like, are you old enough to come into this bar? And in the UK, people hand over passports or driving licenses, and they can see your name, your birthday, where you were born. They can see your home address, and you're like, you don't need to know that information. Really, I should be able to present you. I don't know if anybody watches Doctor Who. The like piece of paper that says, just a big green tick, this person is old enough. That's all they need to know. Green tick or red cross, So in this use case with mortgages and stuff, it shouldn't even be an open discussion for people granting the mortgage. There should be a system in the background that checks all of that stuff, and the mortgage advisor or the mortgage broker just gets a big green tick that says, yes, this person is applicable, or no, and these are the reasons why. They shouldn't be able to see any other information, whether you have a degree, what street you grew up on, what your ethnicity is, what age you are, etc. So in an ideal world, I think that's how VCs will be handled. Of course, there's a lot of stepping stones to get there, and there's a lot of things to be understood, but that's really how it should operate. And also, if you're a mortgage operator or a bouncer at a bar and you're asking questions that aren't necessary, you're going to go out of business pretty quickly, and no one's going to want to go in your club, and no one's going to want to buy mortgages from you. So hopefully human decency prevails there.
Yeah, I think that was a good example. That's one that we often give of like showing that you're legal at drinking age. The people don't need to know your address.
Yeah.
We have one last question from the audience, and then I think we're a little going over time. Is that okay with you all? I don't know if you all have meetings. Okay, cool. I do want to know about like the finance and then the EIDAS thing. So this is my fault for not managing time well. Andre was asking, is the Vitos Resolver platform available in Brazil?
As far as I'm aware, yeah, I think it's fully global. Yeah.
Let us know, Andre. Oh, okay, cool, Misha. I think you were muted, but let us know, Andre, if you're not able to. But like they said, they're assuming yes. All right. So now that the audience, first off, audience, that was really good questions. Thank you so much. The other questions or the other thing that we wanted to start talking about was like the finance industry. Oh wait, there's one more question. Should I? Okay, I'm gonna do one more just for that. All right. Does the resolver also have a global resolver ID, resolver library, also global validator ID? I will say too, maybe people can reach out to you with more questions afterwards.
100%.
Absolutely, yeah. Always reach out to us with questions. I'm not entirely sure what a global resolver ID is. If you're
I'm not sure either.
No, I'm not entirely sure. Whoever posted that question, please drop us a message and we can dive into the details a bit more.
Yeah. Thanks for the question, y'all, and message them. Okay, cool. On the topic of finance, which is I know something we both wanted to talk about, especially since TBD is more focused on the financial industry. I'm curious, right? Banking institutions, I think you even mentioned JP Morgan, they tend to be a little bit more traditional and a little slower to adopt like more like high-tech stuff or whatever, So I'm curious, have you, in partnering with these more traditional institutions, found any pushback? What's the incentive for something like a bank to move towards SSI?
Yeah, I think the financial services side is really interesting. Something that TBD actually I've seen has done a lot of fantastic content in, and one of the things that I've seen pushback around is actually just the language and the difficulty of kind of perceptions of the language of like decentralized. And decentralized doesn't always mean blockchain, and it doesn't always mean crypto, and like there is sometimes these stigmas that exist that actually are just down to language, and I think that is a tricky one, but we're sort of getting there around the education. And yeah, I would thank TBD for also a lot of the stuff that you've written around that. The other one that I've seen on pushback with banks is, and it's kind of understandable, but it's around the liability side of it. So there was a big part of the reusable digital IDs is kind of being able to perhaps use an ID. My last time, use an ID.
Oh no, he messaged us that he needed to hop up real quick. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's this whole piece around like reusable ID, and obviously banks don't want to go and use an ID from that might have been issued by another bank, even though it proves that you are who you are, or etc. Because the liability might still rest with them if there's something wrong with it. Now, what's interesting, and I know you mentioned EIDAS, but with EIDAS and kind of the regulations that are coming out there, and that is basically in the EU, just for summary, is this like introduction of kind of a whole digital identity verifiable credential ecosystem, but a big piece being this EU digital identity wallet. And one of the pieces within that is this personal identifier that is attached to these wallets. And that is issued by kind of government or trusted organizations. And so the liability of the identity kind of doesn't rest on the bank, it actually rests with the government. And so that has kind of helped ease some of these concerns, because I think banks understandably are pretty tired of being liable for everything. And so just continuously improving these technologies. And I think in terms of the incentives, again, they're sort of tied together. It's both the pushback and the incentives, but one of the incentives is definitely around that piece of identity fraud, because that is so catastrophic in banking industries. And I'll be honest, it's only really getting worse. It was kind of, I don't know if you saw OpenAI actually made a whole statement recently saying like, if you're using voice verification systems, like get rid of them, because their technology and the models they're going to release, which they haven't released yet because they're too dangerous, but will release. They've basically said that it will just like wipe out any security around voice verification. So in their statement, they outwardly said to banks, like, you need to change your digital identity systems. So we're seeing incentives this way because the need to be able to verify effectively, but also efficiently, because everyone's getting really tired of how cumbersome like any kind of verification with a bank is getting. So that's where we've seen most incentive, I'd say, from our side.
I did not know about the OpenAI part. That's crazy, and that makes a lot of sense around fraud. We have a comment that someone just said, like, kind of how e-commerce incentivized banks and financial institutions to embrace the internet and digital credit services. Love that. Okay, let's talk about. I don't even remember how you said it. You said IDA. Like, I'm not in your
things.
We assume that's how it's said. Like, we don't know.
Okay. Tell us about it. You all wrote to me that like 2.0 has gone into law in Europe. Like, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it means for y'all. Like, tell me more.
It's like, I'm gonna say it's really cool, but that's probably subjective. It's basically saying that all of the states within the EU, so all the countries that are part of the EU, which I think it's 27 or around that, it's like mainly saying around cross-border services and making that movement from different countries and cross-border services so much easier. It's kind of, when we first started the conversation around education, we were talking about how transitory people are now and sort of this moving around. What EIDAS does is it kind of sets the standards and the certifications around the wallet, etc. That if you, for example, have an ID issued in Italy and you have your kind of education credentials, etc., all from Italy, you can use those to apply for university in, say, Germany. And it's all interoperable. So that's kind of what the critical piece is you can super easily in one country open a bank account in another country using the credentials you have, rather than going through these like really long, convoluted systems. So a huge part of it is just that ease of movement, and seeing it more as like this interoperable ecosystem. And the kind of important things to know about EIDAS in terms of when it comes to the legal side is, I think it's by 2026, all public services, so all government services will have to accept these digital credentials as a way to authenticate into their systems. By 2027, I think it's still a should, but usually that means it's going to go ahead. All kind of like private sector where identity authentication is a critical piece of what they deliver, so like financial services, education,
renting a car.
Yeah, like all of those will then, and also one that's also included in that is big online platforms is written in there. So like your Amazons, etc. They all will have to accept these digital credentials as a way of authentication. So it's a big shift.
Is this related? Sorry to interrupt. Is this related to the European Digital Identity Wallet, or is it completely separate? Oh, okay.
Yes, exactly that. So it's like the EU Digital Identity Wallet is a piece within EIDAS too.
So the EU Digital Identity Wallet is like an implementation of EIDAS legislation. But EIDAS is slightly larger than that, and this is where it gets exciting. If you imagine your digital identity as like a collection of different Lego blocks of information, so some of it might be your medical record, some of it might be your driving license, some of it might be your things that you own or your university degree or whatever. EIDAS is a framework for other organizations to make their own official Lego blocks to go in part of this wallet. And it's not just the framework, it's also the timeline that says so by 2026, 2027, these organizations will have to accept those building blocks, as long as they're built to the specification. So it's quite exciting because we have the EU wallet as like a first flagship piece, but we're going to see so many cool new products, protocols, and other applications be built under the same specification. And it's going to be really exciting to see what developers do with that, and what other issuers take on as like, this is allowed, let people put this into their wallet. Like, you're a streamer, let's put that in your wallet. I've made a platform that lets streamers say they're a streamer officially and stuff like that.
I'm excited for you all and a little bit jealous. Like, oh, like I wish the US was doing that. Before I go into my one last like fun question, has nothing to do with tech. Is there anything, last words you all wanted to add, or like mentions that you want to say, like, hey, check this out? I'll remind people about the dashboard, the resolver, but anything you want to say before we start to close out?
I think we've covered a lot. The only thing I would probably say is, definitely if there are questions, if there are kind of requests around DID methods, or even just wanting to chat through use cases, like just general interest, like please feel free to reach out to our team. There's some very cool stuff being built in this space, and it's a great ecosystem to be in.
Absolutely. I would completely mirror what Misha said. We're not shy to have any conversation about anything involving digital identity. So if you have an idea, even if it seems silly to you, or they'll never go for that kind of thing, reach out to us, drop us a message, because we will. We are the weirdos that love this stuff. So come and be weird with us, 100%.
Love it. I really enjoyed this conversation myself. Even someone in Discord, Aaron, said this is very internet identity workshop conversation. I thought it was really fun. We will end with the most important question of all. What is y'all's favorite Beyonce song?
Oh, I'll let you take this one, Misha.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, I had the absolute honor of seeing her live in 2013 in London. So I think for me, it kind of has to be anything from like the B-Day or like I Am Sasha Fierce albums. I will say once you've heard Halo live, it's hard for that not to be your favorite song.
I was going to say Halo is.
Yeah.
I'm not. I'm not a massive Beyonce fan.
I'm kidding. Go ahead.
But my music, regular playlist doesn't often feature Beyonce, but Halo is a certified banger. It's so good.
I would say that when you go back, it's funny, when you go back, she has on that album a song called Video Phone. And I'm just saying, I think Beyonce saw social media coming before anyone else did. I think that's
true. She was talking about video phones. We didn't even have that then. I didn't even think about that. Someone said they love Bootylicious. They're Houston.
So great.
All right. And I don't even know if I highlighted that. Angie was very excited that y'all used the DHT in the demo. So just wanted to point that out.
Love it.
So I will just say thank you so much to you all for your time, especially since we went overtime. I know y'all are probably really busy, but this was a really great and fun conversation, and thanks to the audience as well. I hope this was helpful for everyone, and see you next week. We're going to talk to some people that won our hackathon, and they built like a ride sharing experience using Web 5. So see y'all next time. Bye.
Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Hi, you. Yes, you. Did you know you're using a centralized version of the internet? It's a world where we neither own nor control our identity, data, or finances. In this current version most of us use, Web 2, the internet is geared towards user-generated content and convenience. That content is controlled by centralized entities, like email providers and search engines, that have access to your personal data. Then, Web 3 was introduced. It's an effort to decentralize the internet, but a lot of its tools are still controlled by a few centralized entities and aren't very easy to use. And yet, there are good parts of both versions. So, to create a truly decentralized internet, we're combining the accessibility of Web 2 and Web 3's goal of returning control back to you. The result? Web 5. It's a new version of the internet that we're collaboratively building. Web 5 is composed of 3 pillars: decentralized identifiers, verifiable credentials, and decentralized web nodes, all of which are open web standards. Combined, they create a truly decentralized online experience that hands control of your data back to you.